Bonjour à toutes et à tous, David Barou, rédacteur en chef aux Échos. J'ai le plaisir d'accueillir sur mon plateau virtuel ce matin Matt Apuzzo, qui est ce qu'on appelle en anglais un two-time Pulitzer Prize winner, quelqu'un qui a gagné 2 fois le plus prestigieux prix qui récompense les journalistes d'investigation. Matt est basé à Bruxelles. Il a travaillé pendant longtemps pour l'agence américaine AP, une agence de presse, l'équivalent de l'AFP. Il a ensuite rejoint le New York Times en 2014. Il a travaillé au bureau de Washington, spécialisé dans les questions de défense et de sécurité. Il a travaillé sur des sujets comme les emails de Hillary Clinton pendant la campagne présidentielle de 2016. Et il est aujourd'hui basé à Bruxelles, journaliste d'investigation pour le New York Times, basé à Bruxelles. L'entretien va se passer en anglais. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you. Merci. Bonjour à tous.
Merci beaucoup d'accepter to be with us this morning. My first question would be why or what is a New York Times reporter doing in Brussels as an investigating reporter? Why didn't you stay in Washington, D.C.?
I mean, I had been in Washington for a long time and had been doing investigations there. And in addition to just why wouldn't you want to be in Europe and see the world if you can? Part of the New York Times strategy right now is international growth, and we've got almost 1 million subscribers outside the United States now. And so what I think the goal is to try to take kind of the Times style of investigative journalism and bring it to other parts of the world, and that's the goal. And for me personally, it's just a great opportunity to try to stretch my legs and learn a bunch of new stuff.
So it's part of you're trying to attract readers outside of the US by telling more about what's happening in Europe, or is it that you want to make people in the US discover more about what's happening in Europe?
I think it's both, right? Our readers have a deep interest in what's happening overseas, but also our readers are more and more coming from overseas. So I think the goal, especially in today's news environment where there's so much commodity news, where it's the news of the moment is so available on social media and press releases and 24-hour television. And I think the idea is to show that investigative journalism is what is worth paying for, and that's the goal, right? I mean, is to try to produce news that is informative and that the world sees as value. And I think it's more important than ever. And it's hard and expensive, and so thankfully there are still places that pay for it.
How different is it to be I would call a normal reporter, even investigative reporter? Well, what's the main difference in the way you do your work? When you started as an AP reporter just on a single beat, and today's job, what are the main differences the way you work on a daily basis?
Yeah, I mean, there was a time when there was no difference, right? When all reporters were investigative, because the job was going out and figuring out what was really going on and looking behind the scenes, and there was time to do that and there was a budget to do that. I think it's getting harder, unfortunately, to move beyond the news cycle for a lot of reporters. I think small, certainly in the United States, but obviously here in Europe, small newspapers are struggling. Small news organizations are struggling, and the model doesn't completely work the way it used to. So there didn't used to be a difference. I think now the two great luxuries in journalism are the time to figure something out and the space to tell the story, whether that's space in print or the space online or the space, the time digitally to put together something on video. It's just hard. It's really just about time and patience, and you need buy-in from editors and hopefully readers and news consumers, they respond to that. I think they do.
Mhm. About a year ago, you published a piece in the New York Times on the common agricultural policy, in Europe, and it was a big scoop. You explained how some oligarchs, especially in Hungary, are using the system in a corrupt way. How long did you have to work on a piece like that? How long did it take you to discover what you had to discover? How much time did you spend on a story like that?
So there were 4 or 5 stories on the Common Agriculture Policy that we ran last year. Boy, that feels like a long time ago. I mean, we've lived a lifetime the past 11 months. So there were maybe five stories in that package, and I would say we spent the better part of a year on it. I don't think we started at the very beginning of the year. I think my colleagues and I really got going in, I'd say, March. And that was complicated because it's this giant pool of money, the biggest pool of money in the European Union budget. It's completely opaque. There's this sort of fake transparency that, this veneer of transparency that the EU puts on it. But tracking where the money goes, as any journalist who's tried to do that knows, is just incredibly impossible. And that's by design. They don't want that to happen. My colleagues and I spent on and off probably a month in Hungary and several weeks in the Czech Republic. We went to Holland, which was just a nice drive for me. We were in France. All told, I don't remember how many countries we were, 12 countries or so. Just trying to track both where the money goes, who's benefiting, and then also to actually calculate the environmental consequences of a policy that encourages, mass production of agriculture. So that's another story where, there's been some fantastic work done by European journalists on this topic, especially from a national level. And I think what we tried to bring to it was kind of a pan-European approach. And again, that's sort of from a New York Times perspective, it's like, where can we add value? Journalists in Europe do a great job covering their countries, and we're not going to supplant that. I think where we tried to add value is by pulling, the Hungary story and the Czech Republic story together with the story of what's happening in France and with Brexit, all this happening all around the biggest pool of money in Europe. So that's sort of how we approached it, and that's kind of why we thought it was an important story.
The myth, the biggest scoop in the history of journalism might be the Watergate, and it started with Deep Throat, a good source. Would you say that to be a good investigative reporter today, what you need, the first thing you need is actually somebody, an insider who's telling you the truth? Is that what you need? Everybody needs a deep throat to be a good investigative reporter?
I think unfortunately that mystique is out there, because I think, the idea that most journalists are going to have, some wise Sherpa meeting us in parking garages, just giving us the information, or an Edward Snowden just, emailing, millions of classified documents. It's just not really how it works. And frankly, in Watergate, the myth of Deep Throat has overshadowed the real legwork that Woodward and Bernstein did to get the stories. It wasn't just handouts from Deep Throat. I think, look, I've never had a source that just sort of like arrived with the story, pre-wrapped. Be a little suspicious, I guess, if I'm a suspicious person.
So what makes the difference then between a good and a bad investigative reporter? Patience, I guess. I think there's two types of reporters. There's the reporter who looks at it and says, looks at a potential story and says, "Oh my God, to get this story, we'd have to make 200 phone calls, or we'd have to talk to 200 people, or we'd have to visit, however many countries." And then there's another reporter who says, "Oh, well, that's great, because that means it's gettable. We just need to make 200 phone calls." Like, great, let's get started.
I think a big part of journalism in general is being willing to silence your inner middle schooler, your inner, seventh grader, where we're all a little shy to pick up the phone and, ask somebody to the dance or tell somebody that you like them because, God, what if they say no? I'll be embarrassed, right? And I think that's a very human response. I get told no all day long. I mean, just pick up the phone. Can I come and see you? No. And then you go anyways and drive to the house and you knock on the door and you make the pitch like, hey, I'm from the New York Times. I came all this way. Can I just come in for a little bit? Can we talk? I think a huge part of it is just being willing to do the work and put yourself out there, because most reporters won't. And the reporters I admire are always the ones who just say, yeah, let's just do that. And what's the worst that can happen? They'll say no.
Mm-hmm. Dig deeper, look at the figures and make phone calls.
Yeah.
Would you say that it's maybe more difficult, even though you're very young, but would you think that it's more difficult to do this type of work today because the companies, the politicians have been getting better and better at maybe covering their tracks or in terms of PR? Do you think it's more difficult today to do good investigative reporting than it was maybe, I don't know if it's 10 or 25 years ago?
Well, what I am is old enough to know that every generation says, kids today. So, I think I don't know if it's harder, right? I don't know if it's harder. I know it's different for all the reasons you just said. But at the same time, it's easier than ever in a lot of ways, right? There's so much information available at our fingertips. If you want to know who owns a parcel of land, in the United States anyways, you can go down to, you used to have to go down to the local government office and pull the giant land record books and find out who owns the parcel. That stuff's available online. I wish it were in Europe, but it's not. I think searchable databases and downloadable bulk data, the electronic tools we have, some stuff as basic as, digital voice recorders, right, that allow you to more easily transcribe your notes, right? There's just so many more tools now that I think make our jobs easier. There's a lot that makes our jobs harder, including the fact that companies and governments have adopted each other's strategies to obfuscate and to lie and to hide the truth. And in a world where it's so easy to blast one version of the story out to a zillion people online or on social media, picking a story to break through, finding a way to break through with a bigger story is a challenge. But I don't know that I buy the idea that it's harder than ever, because in a lot of ways it's easier than ever.
So don't get lazy in a sense. Yeah.
Well, when I was starting out, I sat next to a really great reporter at a local paper in Massachusetts, and he explained that one of the best things you could have as an investigative reporter is a good relationship with your local reference librarian at the city library, because on deadline, he or she could go into the stacks and pull some reference books and find some statistics for you in an era before you needed to remember what year did such and such happen. If you didn't know that, you couldn't just go online and do it and look it up. So, that is not, that sort of journalism I have no frame of reference for that. I came up, my first job was when I was in college in 1998. So
Google was already there. Yeah.
It always existed for me in journalism. So I do think it's easier in a lot of ways.
Do you think that the social networks, the Facebook, do you use them? Do you think that they might help you do your work, or the Twitter? How do you use social networks?
I don't. So I have a Twitter account. I used to be very into Twitter. I have no tweets because I set all my tweets to self-destruct. And I haven't tweeted in, I think, 4 years. I've been sober on Twitter for like 4 years. I deleted my Facebook account. I ended up having to go and create a new one to contact somebody for a story that I could only find through Facebook. Mm-hmm. So I have an account with no information on it. So I think they're fine for searching for things. And, certainly we have a president who is very engaged in Twitter. So to look at his tweets, it's a valuable platform. But I think Twitter is just a terrible place. So I don't spend time there. I think it's really bad. And I think it brought out, when I was using it, it brought out a lot of the worst tendencies, and I felt that it was hurting me as a journalist. And so I kind of just needed to walk away.
Mm-hmm. You published your big story on the farm subsidies in Europe about a year ago. Do you think that it has had an impact? It had an impact as things have changed since you published that story? Do you think that you served the community in the sense by publishing that story?
Well, it's two different questions, right? The first is, did we serve I'll answer them in reverse. The first is, do you think we serve the community? I do. I think if you want to know whether the European Union is being true to what it says, which is we want to lead the way on greening the world, and we want to direct a percentage of our money towards that end. If you want to know whether that's true for the single largest piece of the EU budget, I think there's no denying at this point that is not true. That is false. And that the effects of the common agriculture policy are, from an environmental standpoint, are obvious and documented, and we spent a lot of time doing just that. And so, if you want to know the facts, then they're there. So by that measure, yes, I think we serve the community. I think if you want to know whether oligarchs and far-right populists are getting sweetheart land deals in Hungary, thanks to Viktor Orban, and are making millions of dollars in farm subsidies because the government has carved up government farmland and given sweetheart deals to people connected to the government, and are now benefiting from farm subsidies. Now it's there. But the second question is, do you think it has an effect? No. No. I mean, but that's okay. Like, I don't write stories because I'm trying to change the world. I write stories because I want people to know the world they live in today. And if people choose what to do with that information, that's up to them. I am not a crusader. I don't come to my journalism with an agenda. I'm not looking to change the world. I'm not looking to, say this is the right way to be, this is the wrong way to be. I'm just trying to hold governments and companies and people who are in power accountable to what they say they're going to do. And if you say you're going to lead the world on, going green, and your single biggest pot of money does the opposite, then I think that's worth me spending some time showing how that happens.
Exposing the facts. I have a question that I received by email. What would you like to say to all young people who want to become investigative reporter?
It's a fun job. It's if you are patient, if you like puzzles, if you like figuring out what's really going on. I have a degree in biology, so I mean, my background is in science. If you like the idea of like the scientific method and really kind of getting to the bottom of something, I think it's an incredibly rewarding profession. I think it's hard. I think it's hard to make a living in journalism these days, but if you if you love it, right? I mean, what's the saying? If you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. So it's a great job. And, you know, if it's what you love, then pursue it.
Last question, maybe. What's the next story you're working on, if it's not a secret?
I mean, look, is there any story in the world right now other than the coronavirus? And you know, the response to the coronavirus has been pretty terrible around the world. You know, my colleagues and I have spent a lot of time talking. Obviously, my American colleagues have spent a lot of time writing about the botched American response. But I also, you know, we've spent a lot of time here writing about the botched European response. I mean, the fact that the pandemic preparedness plans basically went out the window, that masks were destroyed, that in Belgium, nursing home patients were just left to die because there was a de facto rule that we don't take old people into hospitals. All of that, I think, needs further investigation. And then I think the question of access to vaccines is a big one. Where are these drugs going to go? Who's going to get them first? How much are they going to pay? And is it fair? Is it fast? Is it all being done above board?
A lot of work. Matt, thank you very much for your time, and we'll keep on reading you. You and the New York Times is doing a very good job. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Merci à toutes et à tous. Et je vous donne rendez-vous, restez en ligne pour d'autres débats qui vont continuer d'animer notre journée sur Médias en scène. À tout de suite.